So this one is for bootcamp.
That season of Green Webinar Series, a platform where we get to discuss and dig deep into several issues as regards environmental sustainability and building back better. This year is themed towards a greener society, and the session promises to be highly interactive, thought-provoking. In this session, we are going to be having experts discuss the interconnectivity between climate change and peace building. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the session. Also, do not forget to send in your questions and observations. Now, join me as I welcome today's host in the person of Kasim Kiburu, the co-chair of Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. Kasim, you have the floor now.
Thank you so much to our colleagues at 1111 Foundation. I guess that is that would be Temitope. Thank you so much for the warm reception and the welcome note to our guests and participants. Once again, hello everyone. My name is Kason Kiburo, and I am honored to be your host today. Welcome to the 2021 Green Webinar Series organized by 111112 Foundation with the support of the Embassy of Sweden, Abuja, Nigeria. The main theme of the Green Webinar Series is towards a greener society that is building back better. And today, week one, we start with part one, climate change and peace building, the Nexus. Get that right. Today, this is week one. It's going to be going all the way to week four, and we're starting with the climate change and peace building, the Nexus. But first, I need to tell you this. Climate change is the most defining issue of our time. That is the discussion today. 111112 Foundation, an independent African NGO, which is committed to improving the overall quality of our environment through advocacy, research, and empowerment by supporting enterprise development in the environmental and agricultural sector of Africa in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This, we believe, will invariably reduce the unemployment by creating jobs, enhance the quality of environment, and add value to the continent's economy without compromising the quality of the environment for the future generations. Well, today I am joined by an impeccable panel. And with us today, we have His Excellency Carl Michael Grants, the Swedish ambassador to Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, and Economic Community of West African States, that is ECOWAS. I also have Adenike Oladosu, a Nigerian climate activist, ecofeminist, and initiator of the Fridays for Future movement in Nigeria. She specializes in equality, security, and peace building across Africa, especially in the Lake Chad region. She's also the founder of I Lead Climate. And last and definitely not the least, I do have Ray Ian Tui, who is a senior analyst at Crisis Group. Ray has worked as an aide of political. Ray has worked as head of political section at the British High Commission in Yaoundé. Before a decade in diplomacy and international development, he served as managing editor for an educational publisher with footprints in Cameroon, Nigeria, and Ghana. Ray studied business administration at the Heriot-Watt University and international relations at the University of London. He is fluent in English, French, and Pidgin. That's very, very impressive. But before I let them get into the discussion, let's do some housekeeping. I bet you all agree that we should do that. So we do have a few housekeeping rules. Let me not call them rules. Number one, this webinar will be recorded and repurposed for the 111112 Foundation.
It is our belief that we need to make conflict prevention and peace building that we call climate sensitive. And also vice versa, all efforts to combat climate change through mitigation and adaptation should be conflict sensitive because they are so very much linked together. Most scientists agree that substantiate the specific links in the local context, this being in Nigeria. And this will help reduce the risk of conflict through tailored, preventive, and proactive action. For more than 50 years, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, called SIPRI, based in Stockholm, has focused on global conflict and peacemaking strategies. But what we have seen recently is that the focus has increasingly turned to climate-related issues. In fact, this was one of the thematic areas during this year's Stockholm Forum on Peace and Development in May. Climate change can undermine human security and livelihoods of vulnerable communities in Africa through different linkages and pathways. Africa is sensitive to a number of risks related to climate change, including reduced freshwater availability, increased food insecurity, biodiversity loss, and expansion of drought-affected areas. Desertification, you could say. And these risks have possible consequences on infrastructure, income, health, and migration, a broad range of issues. As an example, the situation in the Lake Chad region over the last decade and the more recent farmer-herder crisis in Nigeria's Middle Belt region, they both demonstrate the link between climate change and security, as well as make obvious the need for peace building. Sweden encourages strengthened relations between the UN, the European Union, and regional organizations on climate-related security risks, in particular with the African Union, I would say, and sub-regional organizations such as ECOWAS that I mentioned in the beginning. I'm very glad that today's webinar will draw
Monsieur l'ambassadeur de la Suisse est à nouveau
between climate change and conflict and to the need for better and more integrated management strategies, because we need to change and adapt to this new link and relation. Let me dwell a little bit upon the situation in the Lake Chad region. Lake Chad is one of Africa's largest freshwater bodies and a source of livelihood, both water and fishing, for about 30 million people in the region. Sadly, recent research shows that 90% of its water mass has been lost since the 1960s. And this has resulted in conflicts and widespread violence, which has left 10.7 million people in need of emergency assistance, 2.3 million people displaced across the region, over 5 million struggling to access enough food to survive, and about 500,000 children suffering from severe acute malnutrition. Frightening figures. This in turn heavily affects the security situation through increased competition for resources and even recruitment to violent extremist groups. I understand that one of the panelists, Ms. Adenike Oladosu, has been active in raising awareness about these issues in the Northeast, and I'm looking forward to listening to her, as well as to Mr. Arain Tui of the International Crisis Group, with extensive experience from this region. The Swedish Embassy will work a lot on the Northeast situation, Sweden being a big humanitarian donor as well. Climate and security and conflict considerations are integrated in multilateral development cooperation and humanitarian aid. Today's climate-related security risks offer a glimpse of future risks for large-scale displacement and migration due to sea level rise, floods, drought, food insecurity, and desertification. And for those greatly affected, climate change is not only a security issue, it is a matter of life and death. Before I close, I would like to highlight some of Sweden's contributions in this regard. Sweden is strongly committed through our bilateral and multilateral development cooperation to addressing climate change and biodiversity loss globally, and to assisting countries in building back greener and better, more resilient and more sustainably out of the COVID-19 crisis. This is one of the main challenges for the time being. Sweden is one of the donors to the Lake Chad Basin Regional Stability Facility, with a contribution of close to $9.3 million. And this facility aims to improve security and rule of law in the region of the Lake Chad, and to increase livelihood opportunities and to access to basic services for affected households. Sweden is one of the few countries that actively pushes international organizations to integrate this link between the effects of climate change and conflicts in analyses and action plans. We need a kind of streamlining in this to always remember the aspects of climate change and security. We do our best to communicate Sweden's involvement in these issues, and we're very happy once again to engage with international partners and local NGOs like 11-11-12 Foundation to strengthen our joint efforts to address climate-related security risks. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Michael Grants. I now pronounce your name correctly, having heard you say it. Thank you so much for the wonderful remarks. And I realized that you had a very short time, 5 minutes, but I'm glad that I had almost 3 minutes that I left out of my opening statement as well. I'm just trying to I've learned a lot from what you've said, and especially on climate insecurity, especially on the Lake Chad region. And I'm interested in the Nexus, especially on climate justice. I know that is a human rights-based approach, and you lead, you're from the government side. But what would be your approach, especially even if it is personal thoughts on climate justice in this situation, especially going towards peace building?
I think the Nexus as such is really about mainstreaming, as I mentioned, to get these aspects into our thinking. When we make different plans, it could be humanitarian aid plans, it could be corporate development, cooperation plans, and also economic plans and investments. It all goes together. We have to see this aspect. And of course, justice is part of planning. And we can see that many people suffer, who already suffer from different aspects of life, will suffer even more from this climate change. Desertification of the Sahara is an obvious case. Sahara is spreading down, pushing people downwards to the south. We have groups, migration within, like in Nigeria, thinking of the farmers and herders conflict that I mentioned, which gives results in new clashes down south, etc. It's every day in the papers, right? So it's really seeing the consequences and try to forecast of the climate change that we see, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years ahead, and try already now to preempt it by preventive actions and planning.
Thank you again. Thank you so much. And now, thank you for your worthy remarks. Thank you for your wisdom. And we hope to see you around for the next few minutes as we have the interventions of the next panelist. And now I want to drop my mic again for my worthy panelists. But before that, let's dive into the first question to my first, to the next panelists so that they can discuss and share their interventions. How can we strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related disasters? You have the mic, Array, and do you want to go first, Array or Adenike Oladosu? I see Adenike, mic is on. Please welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much. And I'm very pleased to be here today to share in this important topic on climate change, peace building, security aspects. That climate change is going to overwhelm our infrastructure and is going to affect our adaptive capacity if we don't act now. Because we have seen it with the COVID-19, how it overwhelmed our health sectors. And the same thing can also happen in climate change, of which is happening currently and have become a global reality. And how do we prevent this? How do we strengthen our capacity for us to be able to adapt to it effectively? Because it's just like the nose masks, where everyone are trying to adapt to using nose masks. You know, it's a big challenge. That is what it is for climate change, for people to adapt to what they are used to. And one of those things we can do is early warning sign. You know, prior to now, we know that we are prone to flood. So we have to get the necessary data for people to understand why they need to vacate a particular area, why they need to farm this particular time. You know, all of these warning signs, it gives more insight to how you can build resilience enough so that you don't get to be affected by the climate change crisis. And we also need data. Data is important for us to make the right policies. And that is why when you see any report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it always comes out with policy measures to take into account. And this policy measure, if we could have the right data, is going to prevent us from making the wrong decision, because we are seeing that climate change today is leading to security crisis, and it doesn't need us to use more military action. Rather, we need more climate action in dealing with the crisis, just like the northeastern part of Nigeria. You know, I schooled in Makurdi, the food basket of the nation, and I saw the clashes between the farmers and the herdsmen. That building this capacity, we need us to make decisions. You know, there are some policies or some decisions we ought to make 10 years ago that we are making now, and it's making it really difficult for people to be able to adapt to it. And that is why we need to act now, because some decision, if we don't take it now, is going to affect us later when we are going to take it, because it might not fit the current scenario. Rather, it fits the latter scenario. So this is the time for us to act. So building, getting data, early warning sign, and also trying to see how we can educate people the more in doing all of these things, because people doesn't understand the impact of climate change. And also research is also important. You know, we have to look for drought resistant, flood resistant crop that could help boost our agriculture, because agriculture is climate sensitive and it's the most hit by the climate change crisis. And also how we can also educate the people, because we have been seeing migration failing in recent time as an adaptation strategy. because formally migration should be an adaptation strategy, which the herdsmen, they are used to. You know, I grew up seeing the herdsmen moving around with their cattle, but now it is not the same thing. So we need to find alternative to migration so that people get to adapt to situation like this quickly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Adenike. Array, I think you're muted, and I am sure you wanted to jump in on the first question. Please unmute your mic. All right, okay.
Yes.
You're welcome to jump into the first question.
Thank you very much. Apologies, I'm in a slightly public location now, so you might get some background noise, but I hope you can hear me pretty well. But if that's not the case, do let me know. So you hear cars running up and down the street here. Okay. I'll add to what Adenike has just said. I think 3 or 4 key things that we might start to look at, which states and communities can start to look at. First of all, it's planning. But maybe as part of the plan, the initial stages, we need to look at audits. I think countries need to now audit their at-risk communities and at-risk geographic areas. Climate change is something that affects most nations, almost every part of the country, in most countries. But governments need to assess, carry out an audit to know those who are most at risk and build these audits into economic and development planning, without which most of the policies that states and local governments and national governments are putting in place are likely going to struggle when faced with the reality of climate change. So we've got to do audits to know exactly what's happening, what risk people are facing, what risk communities are facing, what risk the various sectors are facing, and then build those audits into economic planning for those areas. Another thing that countries can do is to basically better prepare. By better preparation, we mean education. Climate science needs to be built into educational programs so that people are aware, so that we start to raise a next generation of policymakers and leaders who understand that climate change is a matter of death and life, and can start to build this in every aspect of life in their economic and development planning. I would also say that we need to prepare local people. Local people have been experiencing, have their own wealth of knowledge around climate change. So it shouldn't, of course, be a thing of experts, as we've done in most of our development and economic improvement interventions. Local people need to be heavily involved. They have the wealth of knowledge. There's that they have already picked up. There's some data, information that they've already gathered, and they have to be involved in addressing these issues. I think that from local communities, we can also learn what maybe several generations back, how the previous people were coping with changes, sudden unpredictable changes in the environment, to build that in, and also to ensure that the mitigation programs, the mitigation approaches that are proposed for communities do not go against their other interests like cultural and social, because then that will be an opportunity for some of the mitigation and adaptation measures to rather create room for conflict rather than simply try to address climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Array. I'm tempted to prick your brain a little bit on, and also to Adenike, but I'm hoping that we'll still have time. But of course, before I jump into the next question that's on our you've mentioned about the traditional knowledge systems, like the local people do have the knowledge, and Adenike also mentioned that we need to build the capacity of our people on early warning signs as well. And now about the data that we do have, how can we strengthen that, coupled with the traditional knowledge systems, and of course, using the data systems from the scientific way. And while you think about that, is there hope that we will be able to address the climate change before it's too late? Rather, is it too late, Adenike or Array?
Okay, thank you. It's not too late to address the climate change crisis. And just to answer one of the questions I've just seen in the question and answer section, that talks about how can women get informed about climate change. That has to do with extension service. We have something that they call agricultural extension, and we have something that we call agricultural economics. So the extension parts, they try to get to the farmers at grassroots level to educate them about the impact of climate change. They tell you about new findings, research, crops and all, they get to you, but the number of extension workers to farmers is high. So in some cases, it can be 500 to 500 farmers to one extension worker. So that is too high. So as activists, we are also trying to fill in that vacuum, to reach out to the grassroots people, to inform them about research, about how to grow their crop well and how to make use of their indigenous knowledge. Because I get to research a lot, and I found out that women have this due to the adverse effects of climate change, the time constraint that they have to go to their to a distance to get water, cooking materials and all, it affects their ability for them to be able to contribute towards environmental protection or conservation. So it makes them to take backstage when it comes to dealing with climate change and bringing their own indigenous knowledge to tackle climate change crisis. So they have that ability to adapt, to build capacity, but they also need to be given these tools. They also need access to energy. They also need access to education, so as for them to have enough time for them to be able to contribute responsibly and meaningfully for their community and the country at large. And also talking about the fact that maybe it's too late for us to act on climate change. It's not too late. We can still act on climate change, but it's just that there are some crises that are irreversible right now, just like the melting of the iceberg. It's not possible for you to gain all of those things. The cyclone that have destroyed a lot. Some of those destruction that arise from climate change, it really takes a lot of time before you can build back better. And that is why it's important for us to act now, that there is hope if we can act now. But if we don't act, it's going to become a very big issue that we might not be able to solve it. And any other solution we are bringing on board, it can lead to more crisis, because the time we ought to act has passed. And that is why we are calling on global community that we should act now. And I also say that this decade should be a decade of political will, because through political will, we can come up with some commitments that will be attainable, because we have several commitments, several agreements, but little have been done in making this agreement to come into reality. So it's not enough for us to just sign agreements. And I've not seen where voluntary action makes an action to be completed. All of these agreements or commitments that our leaders are undertaking, they are voluntary. So it doesn't really make a move when it comes to climate action. So, and I'm also hopeful that we can do something, because the climate action has the face of young people that are always there demanding for action from our leaders, just like the Fridays for Future, Extinction Rebellion, 0 Hour, and other climate action that we have all around the globe today, trying to hold our leaders accountable. It makes climate action that we are getting towards, we are making an headway on such issue, So because the youth of today will become the adult of tomorrow, so we have to act now. Or else it to be too late, because it's a double-ended kind of thing. Because if we don't act now, we are going to face the worst part, just as the IPCC report that was released, that was last month, that tells us why we need to act now or we face the worst impact of the climate change crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ray, do you want to jump in? Is it too late?
Okay. Frankly, I'm quite worried when I think about the scale and the scale of what mankind has to do together, the challenge of climate change. I'm frankly worried that it's very late. It's very late, but as humans, we are optimistic, but I think it's very late. And this is perhaps the time for world leaders, for basically everyone on the planet to get their act together. I think it's really running late because we do not see, I do not see enough climate change debate in the public sphere, for example. It's more of a thing of young committed activists like some of you, or some experts working on policy and trying to get world leaders to move their cards a bit. It's not something that's been discussed in elections in Africa, for example, but climate change, climate security by extension, it's something that could change destinies in whole communities. But behold, it's not being discussed by politicians. You never hear the opposition talk about it. African leaders hardly ever mention climate change. It's hard to see that we are really paying attention as nations, as communities, as individuals to the risk that climate change poses. Maybe a lot of work still needs to be done in terms of sensitizing our public, in terms of preparing the politicians to get their acts together. Even in the academic world, you don't have the sense around Africa that the debate is actually there. Also, you can see that the early warning systems are not there. Most of the disasters that our countries are facing are being treated without any reference to the impact of climate change. We have more famines. We have more people getting hungry in some of these countries. But when you hear the government's response, you do not have the sense that they are considering that the climate is playing a significant impact on this. Climate change is a transnational affair. The climate doesn't respect anyone's borders, really. That's why a global effort is needed. And for Africa particularly, there needs to be a lot of cooperation between states. It's hard to see that there's significant cooperation between African states, unless, for example, when there is a global movement or preparation for a global conference, and then the African leaders get to attend, but on their own, you worry, it's easy to worry that our leadership still has a lot to do to get their act together and begin to pay attention to what damage climate change could do in African countries.
Thank you so much, Ray. We still have some time, and I just wanted to appreciate the ideas that you've mentioned, and the key takeaway from what you've said and what Adenike has said. Adenike says that we have to act now, and you've told us that we need to be worried, actually. So those, to me, I'm picking that, and to our participants and to our friends on Twitter and Facebook, let's make some noise. Tweet, share your comments, and also go to the question answer if you are in this Zoom session, and share your ask questions. We're going to be asking at the top of the hour, a few minutes past top of the hour. And because we still have Ambassador Michael, I wanted to ask you a question. This is very direct, the one that I have asked Adenike and Ray as well. Is it too late? And is there hope for humanity?
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the panelists as well. Well, I'm no expert. I'm just a diplomat, but I would say that we have to fight this on different levels. First, you have the international level, and that's diplomacy, actually. And to be able to change, we have to act globally. One country cannot solve this, or 5 or even 10. I mean, we have to engage with the big countries and the big polluters, to be honest. So the Paris Agreement is really crucial. It's at the core of this, to be able to stop and to possibly reverse this negative development. But then you also have to look at the context where you are. I mentioned the top contextual aspect of it. So if you look at Nigeria, you have to analyze what are the risks in Nigeria, what kind of changes do we see, and where are the risks and where are the conflicts, and where are the scarcity of resources, because that is the analysis that you have to make in your country, and we have to make our own in Sweden, to be able to adapt. So that's more a national dialogue, which we are having here today, to see, okay, what are the consequences for this country? What can we do about it? I mean, in Holland, in the Netherlands, which is very low based geographically, they are afraid of flooding, of course. And some small islands could even disappear, and they are nations. So that's the obvious main risk for them. If you look at Nigeria, you have other consequences from climate change, and you have other risks, like the desertification, the flooding, the food insecurity, the migration with this big population. So you have to make your own analysis, the consequences, and then make a plan. How do we cope? What do we need to do today to be able to cope better in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years?
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Duly noted, and I see a lot of action from our participants. And because we don't want to lock them out in the question answer session, and we see a lot of questions coming in, throwing in another question, so that building back better doesn't look like a cliche or just a phrase or something that is just rallying people, but it's just rhetoric. I want to ask you this question, Array and Adenike, and also to an extent to our ambassador, because thank you so much, you're still hanging around. So that building back better, which member states of the UN and the UN are using, so that it doesn't sound like a rhetoric. What are the mechanisms that can influence the effective planning and management capacity in the fight against climate change? And how can we promote these mechanisms in developing and underdeveloped countries? I know we've mentioned about traditional knowledge systems planning, but I'm just curious to know more ideas that you may be having. Adenike?
Yeah, thank you. I think one of those things that I want to also mention is that we need to tackle climate change from the root cause. You know, we have been fighting the multiplying effect of climate change, just like food insecurity, migration, displacement from its roots. It's not enough for us to build climate fossil fuel or keeping it on the ground, fossil fuel, you know, because it's not easy for you resilience while we keep meeting. It doesn't work that way. So if we must build climate resilience and be successful as a mechanism in tackling climate change, then we have to keep the fossil fuel on the ground and every other unsustainable action to be progressive. It's going to be.
Sorry, I think we've lost. Our dear panelist, Adenike. But before she comes back, correct me if I'm not wrong. I can't see Adenike. Okay, Ray, do you want to jump in?
On from there? Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Let me just pick up from there. Okay, we are looking at what mechanisms can influence the effective planning and management capacity in the fight against climate change. Thank goodness we've got the IPCC and its marvelous work and the UN framework and some of the very committed world leaders out there who are doing a fabulous job to put climate change on the front row and to bring adequate action to address it. Now that's all good. I think where I sense that we have a bit of work to do is from the African side. As a block of countries who are more at the receiving end of the climate disasters basically created mostly by the major polluters in the world, in the highly developed countries. I think this is grounds for African countries to tighten up their cooperation on climate security, to come together so that we can have a very, very strong African voice at the world stage, so that we can have a better bargaining power, without which, as single countries, as smaller blocks of 2, 3, 4, 5 countries, there might be very little pressure to bear on the rich polluters for them to actually uphold their commitment and actually help African countries to address some of the climate disasters which has been caused by events rather happening in the major polluting countries. So we need that strong cooperation from the African continent, so it can have a very strong bargaining voice internationally. So it can be a heavyweight. Climate is one area where I think Africa has a very strong voice to play, to act from the moral, even from the moral perspective, given that the majority of countries on the continent are amongst the least polluters in the world. And the world has to come together to help the African countries not to follow on with the mistakes that they had already made. So we need a strong African voice. And then looking at the society or widely, I just mentioned earlier that the politicians are not even engaged. It's not even in the public debate. So there's some work there for climate activists, but not just for climate activists, for every member of the community, for policymakers, for academics, for people in media, and for community leaders to put climate change right at the top of their priorities, because it's got such a cross-cutting effect that it cannot be ignored and sent to the back burner. We also need to involve devolved administrations. It's not something that should remain at the very top level policymakers, and then there is no buy-in at the base. That's just not going to be able to work. So devolved administrations have to be involved. Secondary and tertiary levels of government have to be involved for some of the mechanisms which are being agreed at the higher levels of the world to be able to fiddle down to policy, to practical policy implemented on the ground.
Thank you so much, Ray. Thank you. And I do have a lot of questions from what you've said, but of course, we will still want to give more time to our participants and the great people who are joining us today for the greatest issue of our time. And you talked about buy-in from devolved administrations, such as states. Maybe we can give governors opportunity, or we should press these governors to have climate legislations. That's something that will come later, but I understand that Ambassador Mikkel would like to leave. He had indicated that he might be leaving around this time. And I wonder if he's got a few comments before he leaves. Your Excellency.
Thank you so much for inviting. And I think that I want to once again commend these kind of discussions and 11/11/12 Foundation. I mean, I agree that in the media, in the general media, we don't see much of this. We see a lot about security and risks, but not this link, which is part of the solution, part of the problem, but also needs to be a part of the solution. So I think that awareness and raising awareness is important in Nigeria. And these green webinars are a part of this. So very happy to support and to join. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And I do believe if you wanted to leave, we are truly honored to have you share your wisdom and to give this insight to questions that have come from the leading ideas that you have given us. So thank you so much. We appreciate the support from your embassy. And obviously, this is not the last or even not the beginning, but we're moving forward to seeing a reality in the climate action discussion and to see it a reality. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Okay, so I want to jump into the next question. And this goes to Adenike and Array as well. How can we coordinate environmental work and peace building efforts to help mitigate the challenges of climate action? Again, I know these ideas have come previously from your interventions, but I wanted to crystallize. I want you to crystallize these ideas. Like, how can we coordinate environmental work right now, especially with the issue of peace building efforts that we see in the region to combat or to mitigate the challenges of climate action? Who want to go first?
Okay. Adenike, you're back. Do you want to go first?
You can go first, sir.
Okay, right. Okay. I think firstly, we all have a bit more work to do to help the general public, and not just experts and very high level specialized policymakers, to understand the linkages, the potential linkages between climate change, environmental degradation, and security, especially in the bulk of African countries. If you look at the insurgency in the northeast of Nigeria, far north of Cameroon, the south east of southwest of Chad, that's the Lake Chad basin. Some of the people who are involved in hardcore security work there, like soldiers who we've spoken to, do agree that there is a fundamental developmental problem that needs to be addressed in order for those communities, for those countries to have a chance to sustainably address some of the hardships, some of the reasons why this insurgency is growing. We need to help but now the people living in that area are also suffering, are also undergoing a significant climate crisis. You've just heard from the Swedish ambassador there. I think that's common knowledge now. Lake Chad has lost almost 90% of its original size within a very short time. So water resources have diminished. Farmlands have gone down. It has created mass movement of people. There's migration. We need to help people to understand that a lot of this is as a result of climate change. And as the climate keeps changing, the environment keeps getting harder for that community, it becomes increasingly difficult to establish developmental programs which can give people a way out of the economy of conflict which this insurgency has brought about. You can pretty say much, a similar thing for many other conflicts around the African continent, although there might be slight or significant variations. And now we need to help people to see those linkages, how climate links to food insecurity, links to malnutrition, to poor health, to illiteracy, now resulting in many young people of school-going age not be able to go to school again, maybe because their parents have lost their farmlands, they no longer have the yields that they were expecting, and how that disenfranchises young people and then opens them up as easy targets for recruitment, as insurgents, as militants, or as other violent operators. So we need to help people to see those links. Now, the other thing is that where there is already a conflict, it becomes difficult for decision makers, for implementers to carry out climate mitigating programs because of the insecurity, because nobody can go there. And I'm not too sure that anybody will be willing to go somewhere to the northeast now to go and try to implement some climate change mitigating program because of the insecurity there. So it's not only feeding into climate change itself doesn't cause conflict. It's the management of the aftermath of these resource struggles, which now then leads into tensions and then potentially conflict. So we need to draw this thing and help people to understand that climate change can fuel conflict, and conflict can also prevent the implementation of climate mitigation programs in the areas where we have a lot of insecurity.
Adenike?
Thank you. Just as Mr. Ariel said, you have said a lot. And just to buttress or add to what he have just said, that climate education is very important. And why did I say that? Where it's called, it's a controversy. There's controversy there in such a way that whenever a crisis happened, it's always tilted to one ethnic group. And that is why, because climate change is not known to them. And they are seeing it from the political, religious, and cultural point of view. And that is why climate change, it makes our state fragile. And it can lead to ethno-religious war or conflict if care is not taken, because our diversity should make us to become stronger in taking climate action. But now our diversity is becoming fragile due to climate change. We have been seeing so many agitation recently due to the clashes between the farmers and herdsmen. And many people are not seeing it from the climate change perspective. And that is why education is important. You know, Just being educated is not enough. We need to be climate sensitive, like climate related issues on our educational sector, in order for people to grow sustainably, for them to be able to bring solution to their community and to understand what climate change means formally. And also, we have been seeing this in the northeastern part of Nigeria, that climate change is fueling conflicts because people are losing their livelihoods, and the loss of livelihoods have become a very powerful weapon against peace and security in our country today, because as people are losing their livelihoods, there are no ready alternative. And those alternatives are making people to join armed conflict or armed group, of which these people keep expanding their boundaries, keep moving, and keep perpetuating different kind of crises. We have been seeing the rise in kidnapping recently and different kind of crises happening, the banditry, the Boko Haram and co. And these are things that arise from climate change, and climate change does not create it. It only provides an enabling environment for all of these issues to happen, just like water scarcity, the shrinking Lake Chad, that millions of people depend on for their livelihoods and other basic activities, but it's no longer there. It has shrunk by 90%. And one of the key things to build peace in such region is to restore the lake as one of the steps to take in peace building. It's a peace building initiative for us to restore Lake Chad to its original size, because all of those the connections or the rivers that connect Lake Chad are also being threatened by climate change due to the rising in temperature, the low precipitation, and the rest. So it needs us to restore Lake Chad so that the people's activities are normalized and they could gain alternative living, so that they don't get to be lured or to join armed group due to the ash condition. And also the Great Green Wall Initiative is a very important initiative to see that we actualized it. It started in 2007 by the African Union, but we are yet to see something visible. It's more than a decade now. And we haven't seen 80% of this Great Green Wall being covered in such region, of which is driving desertification, drought, and other key issues that is affecting us and making our herdsmen to go towards the north central. And once the center is weak, it becomes a very, it can lead to war. It can affect the whole nation, because that is what we are seeing currently, that the center is getting weak. The migration of people, internally displaced people. And that is why it's important for us to achieve that Great Green Wall Initiative, so that the herdsmen will be able to sustain their livelihoods. The farmers will also be able to sustain their livelihood, because farmers are also being displaced by drought, desertification. And once there's displacement in farmers, it becomes a very big threat to our food security. It affects different parts of our economy. Then it becomes a social economic issue. And it also affects our tradition, because people will have to migrate to somewhere else and crossing difficult terrain and increase in human trafficking of people. So that is all of this crisis can cause. So we have to educate the people. We have to find ways to restore Lake Chad. We also have to actualize the Great Green Wall. These are all peace building initiatives that can bind people together, can build peace, can make adaptation to become something that is resilient enough, so that people migration will not become a threat to another person's peace. And also urbanization, we also have to plan, because urbanization is also becoming a big thing, competing with our agricultural sectors, because we need land for us to be able to grow, for the population to be able to feed well, because our population is increasing on a daily basis and the land for agriculture is shrinking. The farmers and herdsmen, they have things in common. The farmers and the herdsmen, that depends on climatic factors. Once there's excess rainfall, it can lead to flood. And when there's high temperature, and can lead to drought, leading to desertification. And they also need vegetative cover, and that is why the earthmen have to migrate as a survival mechanism for them to be able to deal with the effect of climate change, of which the farmers also need this vegetative cover for them to be able to grow well, for their crop to be able to grow well. And that is where the clashes usually come up from, so it makes the farmer insecure for them to go to their farms to grow well and the rest. So we have to find ways about this through all of this mechanism I've mentioned for us to be able to do this. And also we have to use the right procedure. That military action wouldn't solve climate crisis, rather it might also affect it, and making it very difficult for us to be able to attain a peaceful world. So we have to know that climate action is needed the most at this time, because once we could restart Richard Lake Chad and the rest of it, then it's going to help to build peace, because people now can now sustain their livelihoods, and also greening humanitarian aids, that for those people that have lost their livelihoods, the alternative should be something that they can that can be sustainable, so that they don't keep asking for aids that can last them for just few days, something that can sustain them for a long time, that will make them to be able to put food on their table, buy clothes and other things. So greening our humanitarian aids is very important at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Adenike. I'm jumping also to the next question, which is about women and children. How can we protect them from the adverse effects of the climate change? All right. Oh, okay. I'm gonna go.
Yeah, that's all
okay.
right. I can go on. Thank you, Carson. How can we protect women and children from the adverse effects of climate change? I think it's already widely understood that when we do have the disasters, women, the climate-related disasters, or it's a conflict which at the root cause has some mismanagement of a resource struggle as a result of diminishing resources from climate change. Women and children tend to be the majority of victims. Like last month in north of Cameroon, between the border between Chad and Cameroon, we had violent clashes, intercommunal clashes between the Muslim, who are fishermen, and the Chua Arabs, who are herders. They've been living in around the same area for a long time, but they've had their worst inter-ethnic clash for ever around the area, resulting to about 45 people dying, and then about 11,000 crossing over from Cameroon, fleeing to Chad for safety. About 90% of those who fled to Chad were women and children. A lot of them, some of them were pregnant women, children, very young children, underage children, having to do several kilometers on foot, and then to cross the Logan River into Chad, which is also risky. So children and women tend to be the main victims of conflict. And when natural disasters and climate-related disasters come, they are mostly at the receiving end. Now, the nature of climate change is that it's quite hard. It's quite hard to pick out one gender and treat it entirely differently. Just as the countries
Ray, you still on? I am not sure if we still have Ray on. Adenike, can you confirm? Can you
He's
hear
still
him
there.
speaking? Oh, can you hear him speaking? I can't hear him. Oh, we lost him. Anyway, would you like to jump onto that question about how we can protect women and children from the adverse effects of the climate change?
Okay, thank you. So everyone needs to be protected from the adverse effect of climate change. But when we look at how climate change affects the most women, children, girls, because these people have fragile livelihoods. Mostly they depend on natural resources that is depleting for their livelihoods. And also they also lack access to energy. You know, they also to some extent also they also lack access to education. For some girls, they have to work for their family before they go to school, and when they come back from school, affecting their performance in school, making them to drop out of school at the end of the day. And in the Sahel region, from statistics, more than 20 million child brides, you know, just as a survival strategy. And this is affecting their contribution. You could imagine if we could educate just a girl child, how the impact can be in the society. When we talk of educating more than one girl child, it's going to become a very big development issue to the country at large. And that is why we have to protect women and girls from climate change crisis, including their children, because the recent report from UNICEF in collaboration with Fridays for Future, it stated that climate change is the greatest threat to child rights. And that is true. It's affecting their mental health, you know, nutrition and different kind of things. And the same thing too to women and girls, that they have to go to distance, a kilometer or more, to get cooking materials, to get water and different kind of things, to see that they're able to stabilize their family. And in the process, they have this time constraint that affects their contribution, and also using materials that are not sustainable to cook, affecting their health condition. So they are liable to die faster due to the bad or unsustainable cooking materials that they are using in their various homes. So protecting them have to do with us having access to renewable sources of energy, so that we don't go distance and getting these cooking materials, and we can conserve our time for economic gain, for self-performances, and for other things that we can use to develop ourselves, our community, and the nation at large. And also access to education, you know, to some extent, tradition, social norms, they're affecting women's total participation in community development, you know. To some culture, they don't have rights to own a land. And that is really affecting food security and the ability for them to contribute in tackling climate change. You know, some they have to inherit the land, and some they can't get a land on their own. So it's a very big issue that if women are given the access to own a land, it can also help for them to bring their indigenous language, knowledge, and their education that they have learned into tackling climate change crisis. And also being educated, they can also become a solar or technicians that they can help to fix renewable sources of energy or bring new innovation and idea on board that we can use to tackle the climate change crisis. So it's important for them to have access to basic resources, for them not to go to distance and getting those things, because it affects them in the process. They can be kidnapped, they can be sexually abused, they can go through a lot of crises that's going to affect them, and they might not be able to participate in development issue. And all of these issues are what we are seeing in our society today, that girls are being used as a survival strategy, especially during the time of drought and floods, because in most of these families that depend on agriculture. In Nigeria, we are an agrarian society. We depend on agriculture for employment, for feeding and all. So once this is affected, then the girl's child becomes the survival strategy due to the bride price and other things that they will use to stabilize their family. So these have to stop. And we have to bring policies, climate, gender smart approach in dealing with this crisis, that every finance that is coming on board should be gender sensitive, so that women and girls can partake in decision-making process. They can also have a leadership position where they can influence policies and decisions for them to be able to protect their future. And also looking at smart policy where children will also be part of that policies in dealing with the effect of climate change crisis. So all of this and more that we need to put into account when we talk about climate adaptation, mitigation, that everyone have to play a part or a role in this in protecting the right of everyone in our society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adenike. I wish we would still have Array to hear these wonderful views. We lost him when he was about to say that, I don't want to mention specifically what he said because I can only paraphrase. He was about to say that we cannot pick on specific gender, but now you have actually made a lot of justice to this question, because we see the effects of climate action are adverse on women compared to men, especially on about personal security and women surviving using, being brides as a surviving strategy. That really caught my attention. And I'm going to be saying that towards the end, but thank you so much for doing a lot of justice to this question. And before we get him back, over the last question, before we answer the questions that our participants have asked, and thank you so much for everyone who is tuning in from across Africa. We have even someone who has asked a question from Sierra Leone, and keep asking those questions and listen and tweet and go to Facebook, tag, share this knowledge, share this information, and make some noise. Thank you so much. So back to you, Adenike, before we get Array. And now that we've picked a lot on peace building and even conflicts that we see, I want to know your views on this question. Can beating climate change help bring sanity to the world? What do you think?
Yes, of course it can. It's what we are all aiming at, that how we can beat climate change, for us to have a world whereby everyone can do its own activities without harming the environment, where our rights will not be abused by climate-related factors, and where we can all be in the same, like in a community, and no effect of climate change like floods, droughts, security impacts, and the rest, where we can have a greener society that is not full of pandemic, just like the COVID-19. And yeah, it's going to bring a lot of sanity, because women and girls will no longer be affected by the climate change crisis. There will not be food insecurity. We can grow our crop is going to yield well. There will not be flood, there will not be increase in temperature, that will be finding ways of survival or trying to migrate before we can survive, because these are all impact of climate change that we are seeing today, that it's affecting our sanity globally. It's making people to cross difficult terrain because climate change factors, it's now overwhelming our sectors. And people have to find ways to survive. And that is why sometimes they flee. They have to migrate, or they have to become refugee in someone else's country. You know, it's becoming a very big issue and a rampant issue in our society today. So it's going to bring sanity to our various countries regardless. So it's what we are all aiming for, it's what we are all fighting for, that this is going to lead us to where we will have a secured right, and nobody will be abused, no right will be abused, and we'll have food security, there will be no housing issue, no energy issue, because energy issue have become a very big problem that we have to find ways to make it affordable for everyone, because for us to be able to phase out fossil fuel, then we have to subsidize renewable sources of energy for everyone to afford it. So that because I've gone through different grassroots activities, and I saw that people really want the renewable sources of energy, but it's not affordable for all. So we have to make it affordable. And also food insecurity becoming a very powerful weapon, leading to poverty and hunger that we are seeing. And as population keep rising, we'll keep facing this food security adversely, because of we need food to survive on a daily basis. Many people are already facing hunger and at the same time poverty. You know, so when we have sanity in climate change, we have climate justice, then all of this issue that we are fighting for or struggling for, it's not going to be there. You know, we will not have climate finance for us to be able to deal with this issue. You know, we'll not have women taking leadership roles, women also contributed to economic gain, and also being educated, giving access for them to own a land of their own, that they don't have to struggle before they can own a land. And it's going to solve several societal issues for us to have climate justice. And that's why the movement for climate justice needs everyone, regardless. You don't have to be educated for you to know that you are part of the movement. It needs you. It needs me for us to become part of that movement. And that is why it's important for us to keep raising the awareness on climate change for people to understand, because I believe that we have to understand that a problem exists before we can solve it. If we don't understand that we have a problem in our society, you can't find solution to it. So creating that perception that a problem exists in our society, it would go a long way in people bringing solutions on the table for us to tackle the issue. So it's very important for us to have sanity in our world today, so that we can have climate justice that will make education to be for all. That education will not be threatened in whatsoever form, and young girls or children will not be able to join harm group of people to become perpetrators of violence in their community. They can be educated and become solution makers, peace builders, you know, change makers in their society, and everyone will see each ourselves to be equal, to be able to bring solution at different levels. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adenike. I am literally flabbergasted by the sound bites that you've thrown my way. And I was busy tweeting, especially the climate justice as equivalent to sanity. And now, happy to see you back, sir, Ray. And we lost you when you were about to say something very, I wouldn't want to call it controversial, but you were almost moving away. your idea was almost on the other side of the table than what Adenike has said. And you are about to say that we shouldn't pick one gender on the effects of climate change. And Adenike, while you are away, did justice to that question. And I wonder what you are about to say. Happy to see you back. And I wanted you to answer that question by just briefly, in one minute, we can protect women and girls or otherwise. And then you answer the question of if you think that sanity will be back to the wall by combating climate change. Thank you.
Okay. No, I was just saying that it's hard to pick one gender or two genders away from the effect of climate change. The way to look at it is to say that now climate change will result to other problems, will create other malfunctions of governance and policy implementation, which would normally lead to problems, including conflict, where women and children are generally at the receiving end. Okay, and I just gave the example of an intercommunal clash in the far north of Cameroon, where which has led to about 47 people being killed between herders and fishermen, the Chua Arabs who are herders and the Muslim fishermen fighting over water resources and cattle grazing land, leading to 11,000 people fleeing into Chad. Now, in those 11,000 refugees, the vast majority, actually about 98% of them, are women and children. So you can see there that the effect, this is basically what we can call a directly climate-related conflict, resulting in about 98% of those displaced being women and children, moving several kilometers and crossing dangerous streams in very difficult season into another country where they now have to live without the protection of some of the members of their families. Many of the children crossed over without any member of their family. So definitely the impact on women and children is very, very high. Now, the way to address this is to go back to what I said earlier, that we need an audit of these communities which are at risk. That is a way to help to protect women, because when these climate disasters come, women and children are at the receiving end. I think the more sustainable way of addressing and protecting them is to conduct an audit and to actually act beforehand to implement policies which ensure that these communities, these countries, these states which are hard hit by climate disasters have the means and capacities to address them. Either it's in terms of, say, mitigation or in terms of, say, adaptation. We should also note that some of the resources which are being depleted, which are being changed as a result of the climate changing, when competition for these resources intensify, women are going to be kicked out of the ladder of priority access to the resources immediately then. So we need to look at measures bringing in more equality in these societies. For example, like in the Muslim Arab Chua conflict, which is about land, grazing land and fishing land, you would imagine very, very quickly that the priority ownership of these lands would be men. And if these resources even go a bit more reduced, then it's even difficult for women to have access to them. So we need a wholesome approach, a cross-cutting approach to addressing the risks related to climate change. It will be hard to do so without bringing in climate justice, a good dose of human rights, ensuring fairness, ensuring equality in the community, ensuring that children's rights can be respected, but also measures that ensure that in case we get to a situation where a disaster now happens, maybe there are mechanisms to immediately evacuate or protect women and children. I think the solution is to act beforehand and to conduct these audits and to plan for the disasters. Just to note that it's not that a climate disaster will single out a particular agenda. It's just that when these disasters now happen, like conflict, like poverty, increased poverty, difficulty of access to resources, women and children are going to suffer more. That's why we must make an effort to plan beforehand, to assess the risk for them. I'm sure in some of those communities, in some of the at-risk communities, policymakers do not even know that when these things occur, women and children are going to suffer more. Okay. Now, let me come to the last part, your last question about sanity to the world. I would say this is a very big, broad, and wild philosophical question. I think it's important for the world to address climate change. It's very important. It should be the fight of our lives. Whether this actually brings sanity to the world, I really cannot tell. But I think it can help to educate us all that it is by acting together, given that no country single-handedly or no bloc, political or geographical bloc in the world can resolve climate change or can protect itself from climate change. The world has to act together. Maybe it will be one shining example where all nations come together to address an existential problem, and then they manage to resolve it. And then it gives us now some sort of highlight of what we could achieve together as a humanity that cares for the needs of every member in the community. But this is not going to happen overnight. I think the sort of damage which is being caused by climate change over time is of such magnitude that we probably need several decades, or if not centuries, for us to be able to catch up again. So it's a long struggle. Sanity, maybe, I don't know, but it can help the world to see that working together as a community is going to be beneficial for everyone in every corner of the planet.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And now that we have hit into the question and answer section, we will quickly go into the questions that our participants have asked. And I see that we've answered them live, 2 of them. We're remaining with 6 questions. I'm going to be marking them once it's answered by either of our panelists or to 1111-12 Foundation staff who are with us. Once again, I appreciate everyone who has written a question here, given wonderful comments to appreciate this webinar. Yes, so before we go, it's question and answer session. Actually, it's answer question now because they've asked the questions. And I think our panelists have seen who want to go.
I was out of the network, so maybe you can repost the question. The
okay,
only thing I can see some comments about Adenike for a wealth of knowledge, but I can't see anything else.
Okay. The first question is that. The second question also, I am just posting. Oh, sorry. I think I'm going to post again for everyone to see. This is the first question by Anonymous. Anonymous is asking. I don't know if you can see, Array. I have posted on the chat.
Yes.
And also, Adenike, are you able to see the questions on the question and answer section, or I can post again here?
Yeah, this one is about building professionals, how they can help reduce climate change.
Okay.
I think in more advanced countries where the they have developed building codes to match with their country commitments under the Paris Agreement and under other various protocols. Some of the building codes are being affected. I'm not sure that's the case for many African countries who are struggling with the resources to put up these codes, not only to draft them, to craft them, to tie in with their climate commitments, but also to actually implement them on the ground. It's a general problem in many African countries, especially south of the Sahara. So yes, building professionals can reduce their carbon footprint. There are many procedures out there now, which some architects, some builders, some engineers are developing, which are either carbon neutral or close to zero carbon emissions. But we also need to bear in mind that there is this very strong argument, which is valid among many African policy makers, that we cannot put the burden of bearing the cost of protecting or managing the climate on African nations who have principally not contributed anything, contributed very little, actually very little to pollution, to destruction of the climate. So I think the building societies can, of their own, working with their governments, develop new codes which are which protect the environment, which are nearing zero emissions, which are carbon neutral. And I think there are mechanisms now whereby countries can use this to claim carbon credits from some of the more polluting countries. So it's something that can be addressed by the building societies and the departments in government which regulate buildings.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Are. Adenike, would you like to answer a question online?
Okay, so the next question, engaging with the big companies, how can we achieve this when big companies make no room for such, especially for upcoming advocates of climate change crisis? Okay, so just to correct that, advocate for climate justice, not for climate change crisis. Impact, it shows the real impact of climate change, whereby these people, they were trying to dig a well, and it took them 9 days for them to be able to get to 27 feet. And formally, when they were interviewing them, said it doesn't take this long for them to be able to get water. The depth was very, very large, like long enough before they could successfully find water. At the same time, they were doing the documentary, like together with that of the Niger Delta crisis, how the gas flaring is affecting their health, their land and everything. So these are ways at which we can do advocacy and people will get to understand, localize it, make your voice to be heard in different groups that you have joined for you to contribute towards climate justice, because we need more people to come on board in raising this awareness and making people to understand that this climate crisis is not superstitious belief. It's real, and we have to take action now from the government angle, individual, civil society, and all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ray, would you like to answer another question? There are
Yes.
remaining 3 questions now.
Okay. So there is that
The last 3 is by Musa, Ibrahim, Loretta, and Ngozi. Sorry, not Ngozi, it's Janet. If you can see a question by Janet, I've just posted up there on
I
the
can
chat.
see a comment by Loretta Obindike. I can see one by Gozi about companies. I can see Janet. Just like, what impact does climate change play on water bodies? I think that's quite straightforward. The question from Janet. Janet, maybe if you were here earlier, you would hear that Lake Chad Basin has lost about 95, almost 95% of its water body. That's significant. That's massive. It's like you have $100 million, and within a century you find yourself with just $5 million. And maybe when you had the $100 million, you had about 3 or 4 million people to support. And now with just $5 million, you have maybe like sorry for the noise. Maybe with just a fraction, a very small fraction of that resource, you have like 6 times the population to support. So that's what it means. Increasing temperatures, global temperatures are increasing. I think now in the past 10 years, we've had 8 of the hottest years since the records began, which means that the climate is warming, the earth is warming, temperatures are going up very fast. In some areas, I think our fear now is that it shouldn't get to 3 degrees per year increase, 3 degrees Celsius, because that would be disastrous. So as the climate warms, rivers dry up, rivers change their course. Rainfall becomes more irregular, making it difficult for farmers to plan their season, reducing food yields. And many farmers rely on rivers to bring fresh water, and most of these rivers themselves rely on the rain. And rains go to places they were not normally going to before. And withdraw from the areas where they used to fall. So that's the impact of that. That's the sort of thing that happens with climate change. So yes, it has the impact of reducing water bodies, and we've already seen that immensely in Lake Chad, and that has already resulted in violent clashes, leading to several unfortunate deaths and heavy migration.
Thank you so much. Any further question that Adenike, would you like to pick on? We have 2 questions only.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is on waste management in Africa. So it has to do with policy measures. And then next, it has to do with infrastructures. We can have policy, just like when you want to build a house, we have every other materials, but you have not yet built that house. That is what policy is. Policy is just like the material you need to build a house, but that doesn't mean that you have completed it or the house is built already. So the next is for you to provide the infrastructures for you to make this policy to work, and to put awareness out there through data, through the website, for you to create awareness to people that this policy is happening. And then what infrastructure needs to come on board in dealing with it. For Nigeria, we have the plastic policy, we have the waste policy, but the structure is also very important for us to see that we are able to recycle, upcycle, and the rest. We have several people making great wave when it comes to recycling plastic, making it to become useful in different materials. So if we could encourage this set of people in providing necessary materials for them, they'll be able to transform more of this plastic into good materials that you can wear, you can use, in your various houses. We have been seeing it. So you just have to do with infrastructures for the policy to work, having different infrastructure around the states in different part of the country. I don't have idea of different countries if they are able to bring up their own policy on waste management, and if they're able to also back it up with infrastructure for these policies to work, and for organizations supporting them through climate finance, financing the waste sector. Recently I participated in this South African green economy empowerment for gender, and it all talks about the waste sector, how to include women to become part of that sector, involving their finance ministry. And that is how it should look like, that the environment sector works with the finance sector too, for them to be able to bring finance on board that they can use to champion different initiatives that can make waste to become something that it can employ millions of people, because waste is not just a waste, it's a resources that we can transform to become further useful materials that we can use at home, that we can wear. We have been seeing different organizations in Nigeria doing such activities. So we just need them to be financed for them to be able to carry out more activities. And one writer wrote in an article that is a low-hanging fruit, that the waste sector is a low-hanging fruit that we can tap into to generate employment for millions of people, for us to go green. So how we make use of our waste is very important. We have to look for initiatives to bring on board, and so financing, infrastructure, and policy will help to scale through for us to effectively manage our various wastes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think if I heard correctly, you might have answered all the questions. Or Ray, do you still?
Yeah. I just wanted to add on a bit on Ngozi Marvelous Gabriel's question, who talks of big companies and making no room for advocates of climate change. I think they have no right to do that, and that's really unfortunate. But thankfully now, advocates do have mechanisms and skill sets through which to get to these companies. That's why I earlier talked of the necessity for devolved administrations to be involved in addressing climate change and environmental threats and threats to the environment. Because if for example, in the local council, in that local government area, there is a bureau or a director in charge, responsible for climate and environmental affairs, then they will be able to address that company. So, but you can't be in our locale and you are not complying, or you are not making efforts to help this community address climate change, or you are not taking care of your own carbon footprint. That's why it's important for every level of government to be involved in addressing, in advocating for climate justice.
Thank you so much. And now that we have lost a bit of the time, I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. And what we've learned a lot, and we see from the ambassador that was here, ambassador of Sweden, who is His Excellency Mikael Grant. He mentioned and he highlighted a lot of issues, including his commitment to bilateral and governmental interventions to build back. And sorry, again, I'm also on the same window screen, like window office, like Array. You might be hearing a lot of background noise. I'm gonna go again and say what I was about to say. A special mention to our supporters in this, in our partner in this webinar series, and that is the Embassy of Sweden. Ambassador Michael Grant mentioned and he committed to bilateral and governmental interventions to build back better on climate action, noting the troubles in Sahel, for example, which is pushing southwards. And I heard that you mentioned about the human rights-based approach to realize climate justice. And to you, our able panelists, discussants, Adenike and Array, Dewey, we really appreciate your time and sharing with us your wisdom. And definitely everyone in this chat has been mentioning and highlighting and saying thank you to all, sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And what you've seen in the comments, we really appreciate that. And we hope the rest of the world have listened and have seen. Array mentioned about the audit risk areas to build on data to inform policy, which was also mentioned by Adenike, as we encourage more people to act now and to mitigate the climate change effects. We also see how climate change has seen wanton destruction all over Africa, and we all need to act right now. Last but not least, we need political commitment from the local to national administrations of the African states, and for us to realize or even to stop and to mitigate the climate change crisis. And to everyone out here, I want to just mention once again to say that thank you so much, Adenike Oladasu and Array Dewey, who are in this part one of the Green webinar series by 111112 Foundation. We hope that everyone has enjoyed it, who is tuned in here, who is going to listen to a recorded version, and those who have seen the tweets flying around. We just want to thank our guests for having shared their thoughts and time, and the participants in this special series as well. We wanted to send a strong shout out to the Embassy of Sweden in Nigeria and the member states of the ECOWAS. The next episode will be next week on September 22nd. Put that in your diary, same time, same place, and we'll be focusing on the past, the present, and the future, the power of sustainable agriculture in achieving zero hunger. Please help us keep the conversation going on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. The hashtags are hashtag 2021 Africa Green Grant, hashtag Green Hangout, hashtag 2021 Africa Green Awards, and hashtag 2021 Green Webinar Series. Feel free to share your questions, your screenshots, and feedback once again, as you do that on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram. Thank you for watching, and tell your friends about this webinar series, and we hope to see you back on September 22nd next week. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Carson. Thank you, Adenike. Thank you, Bukola and Salami. Thank you very much, 1111. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You want to smile? I want to take a screenshot, including our brother Salami, who is doing the interpretation. All right, I have those beautiful African smiles. Thank you so much. My name is Carson Kibiro. I've been your host all the way from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carson. Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, Anthony and our colleagues at 1111 Foundation and Salami, we still also have Adenike and Bukola. Thank you so much. I'm going to be leaving. Just thank you for the opportunity. It's been a privilege. I appreciate it so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain.
I
Thank you
appreciate
very much, Kalaole. Thank you everyone for joining in. And we'll see you next week, Wednesday, same time, for a much more engaging session as well. Thank you so much.
it. Thank you. Thank you.